New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson made a name for himself as a skilled negotiator with some of the most feared dictators of our time. He served as ambassador to the UN under the Clinton administration and has traveled to North Korea 5 times. Governor, thank you. You know how to deal with tough guys. How does a president fighting an unpopular war in Iraq with the American army in Iraq, his own polls at the lowest have ever been, get credibility in leading the American people with this situation in North Korea?
Well, he has to shift gears, Chris. We need to do 3 things that we haven't done before. 1, the president has to order his negotiators to deal directly with North Korea. We refused to do that. That hasn't worked. Secondly, we've got to go to the UN Security Council, get international support for tough sanctions. Right now, at a time when we're pushing sanctions on Iran and others, it may be tough, but I do think there's got to be a coalition of Security Council members, China, Russia, Britain, France, and us, that put on military technology sanctions, and then secondly, tighten the noose on financial transactions of the North Koreans. Third, we should really put the onus on China, which so far has refused to pressure North Korea. So what you have is carrot and sticks at the same time. Our policy of ignoring them, of calling them an axis of evil, has not worked, and so we have to shift gears.
Why do you think the president used that phrase, axis of evil? I don't know who cooked it up. I keep trying to find out, but it seems like all it did was give us sort of a bodyguard of lies to go to Iraq, make it look like he was mad at 3 countries when he had one already targeted.
Well, that's been unfortunate because what we've now had is an axis of evil foreign policy, which in my judgment, the president has wanted to change, but we may be in a box. I think with North Korea, you just shift gears. You have got to deal with them directly. With Iran, I think you have to talk to them directly. They control oil supply, disruptions in Iraq. They're going to be developing nuclear weapons. So it just makes sense to talk, negotiate. Doesn't mean you're caving in, but not having and using diplomacy, I believe, is hurting us.
Let's talk about Iraq. It's the #1 issue in all our polling. When voters go to vote a month from now, Governor, they're going to be thinking about Iraq. They may be thinking about Mark Foley, too, but mainly Iraq. And the question is, do you think Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State, will be able to help that situation in his new capacity to try to put together a bipartisan approach to Iraq?
Yes, I believe that what is needed now is bipartisanship. There's got to be something in between the so-called staying the course and cutting and running. A moderate solution that does involve a timetable for withdrawal, but basically redeploying our forces in Afghanistan where the real threats happen. But I can tell you, Chris, the Iraq issue is not just affecting congressional races. It's affecting local races, governors' races. It's something that right now cries for a bipartisan solution right in between these 2 extremes that I think a lot of people are pursuing.
Why do you think we went to Iraq? The real reason, not the sales pitch. Why do you think we went there?
I believe the president wanted to avenge his father, who I think conducted a very sound foreign policy in Iraq. And the fact that it wasn't terminated, the war, that we didn't finish the job. I've been reading Woodward's book.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot. I think there's a psychological aspect here, and that's not how you run foreign policy. We have to have an exit strategy. We have to have a bipartisan foreign policy. And I think the Baker initiative is exactly what we need right now. And what Baker also said is we should talk to Iran, we should talk to Syria, we should talk to North Korea. And I wish the president would listen to James Baker, a Republican former Secretary of State.
Well, do you think the impulse was Oedipal or filial?
Well, those are words that I don't understand.
Oh,
Chris,
yes, you do. One is you're trying to knock your dad's block off because you want to beat him out. The other one is, my daddy, they tried to shoot my daddy, I'm going to get even. So which is it?
Well, I think it's more I want to get even. I want to get even. We didn't finish the job. And that's unfortunate because our foreign policy should be based on what our national security interests are. And what I think is needed now is a recognition that this war isn't working. But you don't just leave. You leave with some kind of security training of the Iraqis. You leave with a redeployment where we really have threats, international terrorism, nuclear proliferation, homeland security, protecting our ports. And that's what I would do right now. So Unfortunately, the debate is one side and the other side without anything in between.
Governor, last question. We're talking negotiations where you've proven yourself on foreign soil. That was an old Kennedy phrase. You've proven yourself on foreign soil. If you had to negotiate between a new House leadership under Pelosi or whoever and the president, what would be the common ground on Iraq?
Well, it would be an agreement that there would be a disengagement based on what our military commanders say should happen, based on a redeployment of our forces into Afghanistan, and also a transition for the reconstruction of Iraq. You get the politics out of it. After the election with a Democratic House, you negotiate this timetable that is also, I think, responsibly supporting and representing our security interests in the region and not just leaving without some kind of residual force or some transition force.
If nominated by the Democratic Party for president, would you run?
Well, I haven't decided yet. I got to get through my re-election in New Mexico. I've got to elect a bunch of Democratic governors. By the way, we're going to get a majority. There are 22 of us. I bet you we get to 26 governorships. That's the unknown story there. Then after that, we'll see, Chris.
That's the second time today I've heard that. Thank you very much, Governor Richardson of New Mexico.